Okay, so this is going to be an example solves video. Probably a bit different to the ones I've done in the past, because for those I either did it like totally off the cuff, try a scramble, talk through what I see, or I would like go through a bunch of scrambles and then just write down whichever one was interesting and then talk about those. But for this, I pretty much just did like 12 scrambles, except I did still sort of prepare them ahead of time. And instead of focusing on like finding the best thing possible, I'm going to try and make this video actually like hopefully helpful. I mean, not to say my other ones weren't, but like I'm going to be explaining stuff a bit more than I have before, I guess. So for this first one, we're starting off kind of simple. We've got this block here, and I'm going to do the red V. And basically, you probably know this already, but in the one flip method, one of the cases is where you have the centers like this, where like they're both misoriented, but in kind of different ways. Like one of them's on the front and one of them's on the side. And then you can do like a 3-mover to solve those centers and flip that one edge without affecting anything else really. And so you run into that quite a lot for L4E. And in this case, you see you've got the centers like that. And if you do those 3 moves, then this edge will get solved like that. So you can solve a V while doing it. And because of the way stuff is affected, like if you think of this as a top, you can do it from any angle, and your V will still be solved at the end. So that just means that you can choose any of these 3 edges to flip. So like whichever one you hold in this position will be flipped. So that gives you 3 options for the L4E in a lot of cases. And so for this one, if you just do it without pre-AUFing, you get this case, which is not great. But if you do a U prime or a U, then either way, one of these bars will get broken and you'll be left with a Polish flip, which is really good. And so this is another thing I wanted to talk about, is when you're doing something that you know flips an edge but keeps it in the same place. One way you can kind of conceptualize edge orientation is it can either look like this, where there's like no bar, or it can look like this, where there is a bar. And if it looks like this right now, then changing the orientation means that there'll be a bar. And if it has a bar already, then changing the orientation means that there'll be no bar. This obviously doesn't always work. Actually, yeah, it kind of does. But it's more specifically for the cases where there's like one edge overlap with the adjacent centers. But that's a bit technical. Basically, I feel like you can recognize what this looks like and what this looks like. So because we're going to do one that has one bar, we can either flip this edge and have this bar be preserved, or flip this edge and have this bar be preserved. And the way you want to decide is which one will have nicer pre and post AUF. So if you imagine this one gets preserved, then when you go to do the algorithm, which is, I'll just keep this other one out to be honest, L prime UL, RUR prime, you'll want it to be over here. And that gets moved by 2 U's. So it effectively does a U prime. So if you have this one over here, then it's going to be yellow, and this is also yellow. So that means that if the AUF moves, then like it won't be okay. That might be a bit vague, but you won't skip AUF. Whereas if you do this one kept, then if you imagine the blue one's kind of over here, then doing 2 U's will move it to here, then to here. So the whole thing will be solved. So that means that you're better off to go U, then do that. And it also works super nicely because you can kind of go straight into the L2 like that. Or if you wanted, you could go like LUL and then finish off like that. Okay, so this one's pretty simple. You basically are just going to solve the center here. And then you want to do an R move to move this out of the way. Then a B move to solve that center and block so that you form this. And then you can put this back so that this doesn't get broken. Because if you weren't to do that, then this move would break this. And what is actually a better solution than doing R, B, R prime is R prime, B, R. Because if you do an R, that moves this out of the way. And if you do an R prime, that moves this out of the way. So you always have those 2 options. So it's good to keep that in mind, depending on the situation. But generally, I recommend going upwards because this finger trick is a lot nicer than like having to regrip and even doing that, which is still a bit less comfortable. But in this case, you can cancel into a sledge and then it's like a super short body. It's like 6 or 7, like 7 moves maybe. So that's a better solution. But the actual reason I included this doesn't quite work with that, because basically the point is doing RB R' or L' B' L is a pretty common trigger, and I just want to show a one-looking shortcut. So basically, there's like the one on the side doesn't really get affected, the one on the bottom doesn't really get affected. So you kind of need one more edge to really seal the deal. And I mean, you can do this one, and this one's sort of easy to predict. But one that's really helpful to know how to do without manually tracking it through the 3 moves every time is the one on the bottom, specifically the one that's kind of on the other side from where you do this first move. The sticker on the bottom will end up on the front over here. So this is blue. So this is going to be blue. And then that means this is going to be one of like these kinds of cases. So that means that you can kind of go straight into that alg. Yeah. So this one is an example of how if you have a lot of the small sort of like 2 or 3 move triggers and how they affect pieces down, then you don't have to think that much about them. So then if you want to sort of combine them in weird ways, you can sort of look at the overall picture without having to use mental energy breaking down the individual steps. So for this solution, if you start with an R move, you could think of that as like, hey, I wonder what would happen if you inserted this edge. So you start looking at an R move, and then after that R move, you think, hey, this flipped edge and then this twisted center means you could maybe do L' U B'. Then you can think about how those would work in conjunction. Because you've done this R move, then if you do L' U B', this will solve this edge and the block will be at the back. And the L' U B' includes a U move, which is kind of contributing towards the RUR', because you've moved this up. So then if you do L' U B', then this will get solved, or like paired to here. And additionally, when you do the original R move, this forms a block with this. And so you know when you have a block like this, you can kind of do a 2 mover to solve it like that. And from the L' U B', this is up. And so when this is up, then the process of moving it back down can be used as part of that 2 mover. So if I sort of walk through each move of this, the R move creates this 2 mover and starts the L' U and starts the RUR' to insert that edge. Then you do the L' U B' to flip this and solve that center. And in doing the L' U B', you move this center up so that you can do this 2 mover and have this center be solved afterwards. And you also do the U move, which contributes towards the RUR' that was inserting this edge. And that U move also moves this bar over to here so that you don't have to do another U move. And then if you just do the LR to do that, then you're only a few moves away. Okay, for this next one, I'm going to briefly talk about why I'm not going for yellow. So one solution that's kind of nice is if you go a U move, that creates this block. And then, so if we're looking from here, then you can do this same trigger, the L' B' L, to solve that. And if we quickly think about what we were talking about earlier, this blue sticker goes to here. So that can contribute towards knowing that it's this case. And when you have this position, then you can cancel into the alg like that. So that seems like a pretty nice solution at first glance. But when you're here, doing this finger trick for the U', I tend to find isn't that great sometimes, because like your hand's sort of in an unstable position and then you're sort of just moving that. And then it's almost like your right hand is making like a clockwise twist like this, but there's nothing to stabilize it on the other side. So it's sort of like this middle finger is really just like you're just kind of squeezing in here and hoping for the best. And it's like that's just ends up not being that fast. So that's sort of, I mean, it's still a pretty good solution, so you could definitely go for it. And maybe that's kind of a skill issue, to be honest, being able to execute that. But from here, you could also mirror that to use RUL. But this is using less home grip. So that's sort of one consideration that means you might decide against the solution. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't necessarily do this solution, but those are just a couple of things that you can keep in mind with doing execution, I guess. And so I'm now going to talk about solutions on the blue V. Mostly the point of this scramble is to just talk about ways to one look again. So this is a pattern here. You've got this block solved. This center is kind of twisted up, and then this is a bar, sort of like this. So you can go U, and then do L R prime L prime to insert the edge while solving the center. And in terms of the V, that means that you have two centers solved and two edges solved. So the only other thing is this center here. So if you solve this and do that, you'll have a V. Now, if you do all of those moves first, then solving this will break that. So you want to solve this before it's completely finished. And so you can sort of trace through the solution, and you pretty much come to the conclusion that you have two alternatives. Basically, once you get into the RBR prime, you don't really want to mess with it. So it comes down to whether you do this L move to solve the center before or after the first U move. So that means you can either go LU and then do the three mover, or go UL and then do the three mover. So you want to one look both of those when you end up in a situation like that. So I'm going to start with LU. So it's pretty easy to tell that this edge and will not be affected by RB prime R prime, and this gets moved out of the way, so that also won't be affected. So these two are sort of like your foundational piece of knowledge, and already that narrows it down to only two cases, because it could either be one of these where you have the bar on every side, or it could be one of these where you have it on one side. So that's pretty good. And then in terms of the other info that you can get, for this one, I would probably look at this edge to figure it out. Because let's say you've just imagined doing the moves in your mind to get to this point. What you probably know is that doing L R prime L prime here, well, say if you had something like this, and it was like a bar, then it would move it to the other side and solve it. So if this was green, then it would move to here and also be green. So that basically means this sticker moves to here. But if you think of this in terms of the edge, this sticker moving to here means that this sticker will move to here, because it's like the ones on the outside and the ones on the inside, I guess you could think of it. So that means that this red one will go over here. And you could also think this yellow one will move over, because like if this was green, it would stay. So this is yellow, this is red. We know that that's not a bar. So that tells us everything we need to know to determine that case. So it's going to be this. And you can cancel into it, which is pretty good. And then, where is the solution? Oh yeah. So if we want to do the U move first, then UL, we know that is not going to be affected, that flipped edge. And you know that this bottom one is not going to be affected, but it's a little bit trickier to use this. You could do that because you only need 3 edges, and you could figure it out based on that. But what immediately jumps out to me is this edge. This is what we were just talking about with the RB prime R prime. We know this blue will move over here. So that tells us these. And then you could definitely figure it out based on this one, but just because we haven't talked about this edge yet, if you think of, so we're at this point, RB prime R prime, the only move in there that's going to influence this is the B prime. So you can just think of it as doing a B prime. And if it did a B prime, it would be there. So that tells you it's this. So it was better to do the other one and cancel into the Polish flip. But that also demonstrates how it's good when you have a V that has 2 different move orders that both work. Do both of them, and you probably have different cases, and one of them will be better. So for this next scramble, I'm going to be primarily focusing on this angle, which is a yellow V/layer, and telling you how, if you look at these edges, it gives you different options for the Vs, because if you think about it on like any given side, on any given scramble, you've got 3 different options for a V, or I guess 4 if you also consider like a layer as an option, but basically 3 options for a V using any set of 2 edges. So for this one, if we start by looking at the blue edge, it's not one move away from being, well, actually it is, never mind. But basically, if you look at how you could pair this to a blue and yellow center combo, you could do a U prime, but that's sort of useless when you look at the other edges. So if it doesn't work with one of them, find the other one and try connecting it to that. So in this case, we're going to go, what's the other one? It's here. So we could go LR prime to do that. So that's one way of thinking about this. The next one is this green edge. You can connect it to this in one move, so that's probably good. And also this red edge, you can connect it to this in one move, so that's probably good. So we've sort of narrowed it down to, with the blue edge, doing LR prime, and that solves this green edge. So that's kind of like, right, we're either going to do a V with these two, or maybe we'll do a layer. And the reason we know we can do a layer is because this is one move away from here. So if you go B and then pair this, so you pair the red edge to centers, then you pair the green edge to centers, then it means that solving this center pairs that to all of this. But then that gives you a 2-flip if you one look it. And so because we have two different options, like we were talking about on the last solve, you want to look at the other one, right? So if we go B to solve this center first, and then just do these with a layer, you can see this edge will be solved. And then, wait, sorry, that's the layer we just discussed. But if we connect this first, then this edge gets solved, except it won't get everything else turned into a 2-flip. Okay, that was not very helpful. Anyway, so pretty much, yeah, if we start with this move, because it's the alternative that doesn't use this to make something, but it still uses these two. It's basically just a different move order of doing the L and the B. Then this moves down here. So using the BR prime, that's actually kind of like if we were doing RBR prime, we would know this sticker goes to here, as we discussed. And so it really is the BR prime that comes from. So we know that this blue is going to move to here, and that's going to be blue. So that makes it pretty easy to know that that's a hedge, and you can go into it. Yeah, that solve was a little bit all over the place, but the main thing to get from that is how you can, A, look at V options as a combination of two edges if you get really stuck, or B, when you have an edge somewhere, you can find two different places where the two centers that have the two colors of the edge on it are next to each other. So like here and here for a green and yellow edge. So yeah. For this particular one, I'm basically going to be telling you what the V is and then explaining how to one look to see what the case is afterwards. There would be some more intricacies you could go into in terms of like why we decided to do this V. But I feel like that stuff is kind of covered by other solves. So for this one, I just want to make it a bit simpler. So we're going to start by doing U prime to attach this to these centers, and then R prime to solve this center, and then L prime BL to solve that center at the back without breaking anything. So to start off with, the L prime BL, if you think about what it affects, this U prime R prime, this edge will be untouched. So that gives us one of the edges for free, basically. And then if you think back to the thing where like L prime or similar moves this front one to the other bit of the front and the side one to the other side one. This L prime BL, you can think of that as how this edge is affected. So the blue will go to here, and more interestingly, the green on the outside here will go to this bit. So now we know we've got this. That is the information that we know. And then if you look at the bottom here, the R prime will move this to here. And then once we're at this point, the L prime BL will effectively just be a B for this, because L prime does nothing, B moves it there, and then L does nothing when it's over here. So we know that L prime BL is effectively a B. If you did a B move, that gets solved. So then because we know this is here and that's solved, then we know that we've got that as our case. And so that's a good solution. So this one is more about an execution tip, because one thing that can happen with just how Pyraminx is as a puzzle and how everything is intuitive is you can independently be like, okay, I found this solution. That's kind of cool. Then find another solution on another color where you're just literally looking at that V and deciding what to do. That ends up being the exact same moves mirrored to a different angle. Like you're doing an RU here, or you're doing an LR here, and the same moves are being applied to the puzzle, but it seems like a totally different solution. And so sometimes you can find a solution that seems kind of good, but it's a little bit awkward to execute. And then you switch it to a different angle and suddenly it's good. So I'll find the initial version of this on this angle. So basically, we're going to look at this edge for the green V. If we do an L prime, it's connected to those. So that's a good start. And then that moves this center up so that we can pair this edge to the center with a U move. And then if we want to solve these, we want to start with this one, because if we do that, that will get broken. If we do that, then we can just simply solve that one. And it gives us a hedge. So that's a good solution. But the L prime U, L prime is a little awkward. It would probably be fine, except these tips make it so that, like, basically to do this first bit, you sort of want to save a bit of a solid grip with your right hand, I would say, for the L prime U, or more, I guess it would be fine if this tip was turned the other way, but doing this R prime tip really makes this whole thing awkward to execute. So then what you can do is, because this is 3 gen, it's just L, R, and U moves, then you can just rotate, you just do like Z rotations, and it'll still be RUL for all of these angles. So you don't really have to worry about how the back factors in. This angle is another one that you would probably notice the V from, because if you do U prime to sort of attach that, cancel into inserting this, I guess you could think of. And then for this, you can do the technique where this is an L3E. If you're holding it from the front, you can execute it like that. And you can look at it as this center, and then you're moving this edge to here to do a V. You can think of it as doing an R, L prime, R prime to finish your V, and then you cancel into L4E like that. But I would say that's probably my least favorite of these angles, because then you end up with just a slightly awkward turning for that. Although the tips might be a little bit better than on the previous angle we looked at. But still not totally ideal. And then the one that I feel like you would be the least likely to see just by doing it normally is if you then mirror that solution. Let's say it starts with U prime R, then we can picture these things moving that way. And then we know that it's going to start with R prime L, like that. And then it's pretty easy to see the rest of the solution from there. So these tips are way nicer, or at least I like those tips. Well, that was lucky, but yeah. That's probably my favorite out of the 3 angles, and yeah. So on this scramble, you can kind of look at this flipped edge here, and basically, if you take it away from this center, move this center, and then put it back, you can orient it that way, and that's basically just mirroring the one flip thing. So that's one way of thinking of that. And then also, if you think of this center and this spot, obviously you can't put it there right now because it'll be flipped. But if you move this down, then using R and U moves, we'll be able to solve it. And those happen to coincide because basically you can do this L to move that down so that this can go down there. And then this means that you can then do that. And then that serves as kind of the first move of the thing for these. And then you can finish that off like that. And it just so happened that those moves also aligned nicely to move the centers into the right spot. Like that moves this down so that then this gets moved down again, and then it's all kind of good from there. So this is kind of a bit of a common thing with pairings where, like, if you basically do a move that sort of contributes towards multiple things you want at once, then that's kind of how you can be efficient. But that gives you this case, which is kind of fun to spam TPS on. And to be honest, in comp, this is probably the exact solution that I would do. But just to play around, I'm going to show you how you could sort of find other things to do, I guess. So if we look at this edge here, if we want to make something with that, then you could think, well, if we did something like that, then that would pair it up. And then, you know, like we could somehow do like that. But the common thread that comes up a lot when you try to do those solutions is that this center is not oriented in a good way to make that happen. So we can actually change that. If you start by doing an R prime here, then what you can do is go, cool, I'm going to go U to take this away from here, then do an L so that the slot gets moved back, and then I can put this down and then insert that, and then that just leaves you with this. So yeah, you basically start with moving this down because the process of doing this is only going to do one R prime. So by the time that you get to like this point, you still need to do another R prime, but this block is in the way. So that's why you did the R prime at the beginning. And another thing to note is that if you wanted, how do you do this? Shoot. Another thing to note is that you could also kind of do it on the other side, but I don't like the finger tricks for that as much. So that's why I sort of showcase the right-handed version of it. So this one is another example of how you can kind of multitask. So the concept we're going to be doing here is basically, we're holding it from this angle. So we're doing a red V. And we're basically just using inserts to put the edges in because like you have solved centers. So that's all you need to do, right? So, I mean, you can just like insert that edge and then insert this edge, and that's actually a super good solution. And I think it's about equally as good as the one I'm going to show. But the thing here is if you observe the location of this edge, it needs to basically have like to be taken out of the way, have a U prime done, and then be put back, which is why that solution works. But you can actually insert this edge while accomplishing that. And you might be thinking that doesn't make sense because if you do that, then nothing happens to this edge. And if you go UL prime, then that's doing a U move instead, which is not what you want. And this is also bad because like then you have to do another AUF before you can insert that edge. But you can kind of start inserting this edge, then insert that edge, and then finish inserting this edge, but it actually gets done for you. But okay, basically, I'll just show you the moves. So R prime is the beginning of doing R prime, U prime, R. And then you can go UL prime to insert that. And the reason you want to do that instead of just LU prime, L prime is, well, two U moves is the same as a U prime. So doing UL prime moves the center by a U prime. So when you move that back up, that edge will be solved. But because after you've done this U, then doing this LUL prime will also move this edge by another U move. So then it's over here. And then that actually did this insert at the same time. Then you move that up, that's solved, and you just have U sexy. So again, not super well explained, but basically you could sort of insert both edges at the same time while also influencing having a solved edge at the end for that scramble. So just take a look back at that solution and you'll see what I mean. Okay, I'm a fan of this one. So if we're here, one way you can start making this V for green with where I've got it, so you can see where all the edges are and stuff, is, do you remember how with RBR prime, this green edge on the bottom would move to be on the front? The bottom one goes to the front. And do you remember how with LR prime, L prime, you had sort of this thing where this gets preserved to the front, and then if you look at the other edge sticker, then that goes to the other edge sticker on the edge that we're going to. So like this edge is going to here. There's two edge stickers here. We know this sticker is going to here. So this sticker must be going to the other one on the side. Basically, if we do an RBR prime to solve this back center while preserving this block, then you know this red will come to the front, but we also know, in this case, the sticker on this bottom edge that gets affected by the trigger, that is not the one that goes to the front, so this green one, so the one that's on the side, will go to the side. So this is actually another version of the trick. Instead of going, the bottom one goes to the front, you can go, the side one goes to the side. So by doing this, we actually solve this center, preserve this block, and then move this to here. And when it's here, then you're actually 2 moves away from finishing a V. So you can just go UL. So you're kind of like canceling into inserting that. This kind of sucks though. But the reason I showed that was to demonstrate the this goes to here trick, and also because that is how you start finding the solution I actually want to do. Because if you look at the other edges and how they get affected by doing RB, well, actually, I want to check how much storage I have. Okay, I can keep going. So if you remember how doing like an LR kind of changes whether the edge is like, actually, that's a bad way of putting it. But basically, doing this is going to make that be flipped. So when we do the first two moves of the RBR prime, this ends up being flipped. And this presents an opportunity because if we now focus in on this center and this edge, then that kind of looks like the one flip thing, right? So if you actually just do U and then do the one flip, then you're here, which is like basically solved. So that's kind of neat. And to show what actually happened there, oops, that's the wrong scramble. We basically influenced giving ourselves this ML4E with no AUF and then canceled into it. But it basically was like, start doing this trigger, then do this one flip thing, then finish off. So yeah, a few interesting things to learn from that one. So for this scramble, you should definitely do like that. But I mean, I guess the whole point of this isn't really about the best solutions, so I didn't really need to show that. But right, so the lesson for today is on this one, we can start doing a V by looking at how over here, this, if you do that, then it's sort of the pattern where you go from bar to solved that we've talked about a little bit. And then this R prime also solves this center and edge combo. So this would basically be a 3-move V if this center here was solved, but because it's not, we can just solve it first, then do that, and then we're good to go. But this presents one of those things where you have 2 moves you can do in a different order. You can either go L prime, U prime, or you can go U prime, L prime. And so if you just think about it, like the U prime, L prime preserves this block, so we should probably do that. And then U prime, L prime, B prime. Then you end up to here, which is kind of why I wanted to show this. This is sort of something that is the result of some ML4E algorithms, or you use the way that this trigger works, I guess, as part of some ML4Es. And this is something that's really good to know when you're learning ML4E, is like find the commonalities between them. If like 2 different cases set up to the same ending or whatever, like really try and figure out how all that works and how each move affects every single piece, because that allows you to make your own algs and do all kinds of cool stuff with your intuition. But here, basically, whenever you have this kind of ML4E situation where this is all like a giant block and you need to do like your last move upwards, and it's not just like this where you just do U prime R, this is on like the other side, then do like a sledge R and then it's solved. So that's that solution. Okay, the final solve. We're looking at a blue V, and I think we've already basically had this V before in the video. You want to do a U prime and then you go R prime LR to insert this edge down here and solve the center. So if we want to look at, we get this case. But what you want to do here is notice this bar thing. If you had like an LR, it would solve the edge. So if you think about the moves that are going to take place, it gets moved over here, then you do the L prime, then you do this B. And that B is sort of the key to it, because that B could be the second move of doing this. Like if you went like LR, this R happens when you do the B. So if you actually had this up here when you were doing the L prime BL, then that edge would get solved. So if we go back to the start, then in order to preserve this, and basically you just see this whole thing coming together, like you can do an R prime U prime R, because that means that this U prime still moves this to where it needs to be. But then when you get to the stage of doing the L prime BL, you can start with an R so that this gets solved, like we were talking about. And then that R solves the center because we unsolved it at the beginning of the R prime U prime R or R prime UR. I think it was R prime UR, so that then it gets solved back again, and then you just have that. So I really hope this was helpful. I guess it was sort of an advanced video, but the other thing about it is it was like insanely ramble style, like just yapping all over the place. It's like 35 minutes long. Very different video to anything I've done before, but I really hope that you enjoyed it and you learned something. And yeah, use my code at Speedcube Shop. It's just my name, Jasper, and I hope to meet a bunch of you guys at the World Championship next month.